Good morning, everyone. I'm saying good morning because this is a pre-recorded show, and I tell you, this is one of those opportunities and times that you kind of dream of. You kind of pinch yourself. Today we got a very, very, very special guest with us. Personally, one of my inspirations when it comes to trying to do this whole broadcasting whole thing. Kind of pioneered the way for everyone in this space. I feel kind of safe to say that. So this morning we have special guest, Mr. Dave Nemo of the Dave Nemo Show, joining us for this morning's Rates and Lanes podcast. So this is a pre-recorded show. We hope you guys enjoy it. And without any further ado, I want to bring on my co-host and the man of the hour himself, Mr. Dave Nemo. Good morning, Dave. How are you?
Good morning, Rico. Good morning, and thanks for having me with you.
Well, good morning, Dave. It's so great to see you again. We met at the ATH show, the big show down in York, Pennsylvania. It was an honor to meet you there, and it's certainly an honor to have you on the Rates and Lanes podcast this morning.
Well, it's funny. We were at the ATHS show in York, and Tara and I were doing some short videos. We call them semi-short stories. And we're inside the building. There's like 850 trucks there. My joke is there were 850 trucks in the show, Rico, 851 golf carts, and one scooter. And Dean Croak was on the scooter.
Okay.
Yes.
But at any rate, we were looking for some interesting trucks to shoot, and whoa, we saw that Coca-Cola truck, that 1976 Ford, and it's like, whoa, we got to do this. And we didn't get to meet many of the owners because you park your truck and then you start walking around everywhere.
Right.
And Chuck just happened to be right there, and we met, and well, here we are.
Well, the reason I happened to be there, Dave, is because I had to spend 5 hours cleaning that thing because on the way down it had gotten a little bit, I'd had it washed, and on the way down somewhere around Harrisburg, I hit some rain. I hadn't washed a truck myself in years, to be honest. Okay. I just take them to the truck wash usually, or have a guy come because it's so much more cost effective. Have a guy come and wash everything. And here I had to have that waterless wash in there, and I had brought some, luckily. It took me 5 hours to clean the truck, but I got to meet you during that 5 hours and a whole bunch of other people. It was probably some of the best 5 hours I'd ever spent in my whole life.
Oh yeah, it's great. But listen, I got to tell you, washing a truck is like riding a bike. You never forget.
No, exactly. And it's funny. It's one of those things when you're washing something or you're cleaning something that you really love. It's a work of love. It's not work. You know what I mean?
You're right.
It's just one of those things, because you take so much pride in it because you're so proud of it. Dave, I have been listening to you now for starting next month, if I am not mistaken, on sometime around October 5th, will be 50 years. That's how long I have been listening to you. And I didn't know what happened to you for a while. I couldn't find you. And then lo and behold, about 20 years ago, I installed satellite in my vehicle, satellite radio. And oh my God, there's Dave Nemo.
Well, broadcasting and now podcasting. So we have cast a wide net, I guess you might say.
You certainly do. But I really want our listeners to hear, because you're really you're probably one of the only people that has run this whole last 50 years of my personal experience in this industry, who's been there the whole time. There's hardly anybody else that's been there. Most of them have either moved on or passed on.
Yeah.
And I find, you've got a great voice, great demeanor. You've done an incredible job with our industry. But I want to share, and I don't even know it really. I know a little bits about it. We want to hear your story. It's a great story. How did you get into this? Could you tell our listeners, tell me, tell Rico?
Okay. Well, once upon a time in a galaxy far, far away, I grew up. I'm a lifelong musician. Let me put that down as a foundational thing here. So I lived with the records, radio, and when I was a little boy, used to listen to the radio a lot, the pop music, you know, rock, and then rock and roll and all of that. But I, I came to an understanding when I was in high school. This is fun. I like this. It's exciting. And back and I was in grammar school. Well, I'm 75 years old. So I went to grammar school in the 50s, high school in the 60s. So I graduated high school in 66. But in the 60s, back in those days, you had three TV channels and
Yeah.
PBS if you had it. So everybody was watching the same show on the same night. So if you were watching Bonanza or I Love Lucy or whatever it was, that created what they called water cooler talk
Right.
when you went to work in the office, because everybody kind of had a thing to base their conversations on.
Right.
Television for the kids. And again, I may be wrong, but the kids that I hung with, we didn't watch television with the family that much when we were in high school. We were in our rooms listening to the radio.
Yes.
And in those days, there was one, maybe two, possibly three, depending on the size of the town you lived in. Here in New Orleans, there were two rock and roll stations,
Okay.
WTIX and WNOE. WNOE subsequently became a country channel, a country, listen to me, channel, a country station. And I bring that in because it plays directly into the question that you asked. So this is like the Reader Digest on steroids
Right.
story. So, all right. So I'm listening to the radio and I came to an epiphany. What is making this so engaging? Why am I listening to this? Why am I going to be talking about the new Animal song that just played last night for the first time with kids in school? And the answer was, it's the disc jockeys. They made it fun. They created the excitement. They were
Yeah.
all so funny. And there's an art in music radio. A lot of folks don't like it, but it tightens things up. It's called walking up to the vocal. And if you go back, you won't hear that very much anymore, because people want to hear the song
Right.
unsullied, so to speak. But that 7-second intro, before the singer starts, the disc jockey's talking up, boom, to the vocal. The vocal starts. It's tight, it's fast, it's compact, it moves, moves, moves. So all of that being said, I think that's what I want to do. So I go to school, go to Loyola here in New Orleans, and I became the program director of the radio station at campus. Now it was a real operation, guys. We had commercials. We were a commercial station,
Right.
and you did on campus. If you plugged, and everybody had a plug-in radio, battery radios around, but you basically had an AM radio, possibly AM, FM. You would plug it into any outlet on campus, electrical outlet, and the electrical uh, grid on campus carried our signal.
Ah. Okay.
Very unique, very unique.
Okay.
So every student had the opportunity, teacher, anybody on campus who could plug in a radio had the opportunity to hear the station. So we didn't really broadcast. So we had a sales department, we had a program. It was the real thing. We operated like a radio station. Now, let me circle back to Loyola University. Back in 1922, WWL 870 AM, which is a powerhouse, what they call a heritage station, has 3 call letters. Most
Right.
radio stations that you hear about, like as I mentioned, WTIX, WNOE,
Right.
they all have 4 letters because the 3 letters were taken, by that time. But the station started as a science project in 1922 in Beauvais Hall, which is it's still there, but part of the quadrangle. A lot of the and if you look at the front of Loyola, it looks like 1,000 other colleges built in that time, early
Right.
1900s. Okay, so they parlayed that science project into a real radio station, and in the 20s and 30s. So in the 1930s, the Federal Communications Commission and I'm really skimming over this, but the Federal Communications Commission basically established what they called clear channel frequencies, which meant WWL is on 870 AM. 870 kilohertz. There are other stations, obviously, that have to be in different parts of the country because they're and you have to separate stations by 10 kilohertz. So, in other words, it's a field that got crowded pretty quickly.
Right.
But
Of course.
during the Depression, the idea was to create a system whereby people in rural America or the far-flung distant communities, as they would say, would be able to get big city radio at night. So if there's a station on 870, and I used to know where they all were, but let's say there's a station in Nebraska that's on 870. At sunset there in Nebraska, at sunset, they would sign off the air. And therefore, we just filled the space.
Okay.
And then at sunrise, they'd come back on the air.
So you shared the frequency, basically.
Shared the frequency, yeah, in a sense. They bowed out, and we came in, and then they came back in. So that's how the clear channel idea was born. And there's stations in Denver and Chicago. All the big cities have them.
Wow.
Okay. Now, okay, so let's go back to now. Let's go to okay, so I'm out of college now. I graduated in 70. And I joined the Army. So, and the sidebar there is I wound up doing Nemo's night beat on AFKN, Armed Forces Korea Network, at the Yongsan Army Air Force Base in Seoul, Korea. Okay.
Wow.
Now so I graduated in 70, but when I'm a junior, WWL, the guys over there said, we have a school. We're owned by a school that has a newly developed communications department. I was in the first communications, and they're everywhere now. Degree in communications, they're everywhere. All right. Well, I was in the first class at Loyola, and they said, we got all these kids at Loyola. They have a radio station. We don't have any kids working here. So when I was a junior, they said, hey, if you'd like to take a shot at a job at WWL, send us an air check. An air check is like a resume, it's like, you know what I mean? So we all sent them in. And literally a year later, I walked down to the department. It's in the basement of the Dana Center. We had radio, television, film, the whole 9 yards. And the receptionist said, hey, Dave, you got a call from John Pila. Now, John Pila was the program director at WWL. He also did a TV show called Saturday Hop, a la American Bandstand and things.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
The American Bandstand?
I'm sorry?
The show that we all watched, American Bandstand?
Yeah, it was the New Orleans version of that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So he did that. And whoops, sorry, Mike. And I called him back, and he says, hey, why don't you come down and talk to me about, coming to work? So I did. And I wound up on the weekends doing a little bit of this, that, and the other. And then I went into the Army, and I wound up on the radio there. Well, while I was gone in March of 71, and Rico, this is kind of an interesting little thing. The Mid-America Trucking Show, which is like the biggest North American show, started in the same month and year. Wow. Paul Young started Matt's when Charlie Douglas started the Road Gang, and that was the name of the show. Okay. So he's doing this. He's playing country. And at that time, we're talking, 1971, the ICC, was still running things.
Oh, yeah.
Commerce Commission. And the rules and regulations as they were in trucking were around since, 35 and then 1940. So that was, just in a closet somewhere, and everybody was just doing their own thing out there on the road. Yeah. Paper logs, comic books, the whole night. And if I could digress for 2 seconds, back in those days, job, getting the job done was job one. And you
Yes.
did whatever it took to get that load where it needed to go. And you were the master of your own ship on the, as Johnny Cash would have said, the concrete seas,
Yep.
master on concrete seas. So anyway, so we're doing that. And and so trucking was still regulated. We still had a lot of wildcatters, the owner operators, those guys. Well, that's kind of where we were, and that was our main audience when you think about it. So Charlie starts this thing to keep drivers, and this is something that I'm not making up at the moment. This was what the deal was. It was a self-imposed mandate to keep drivers awake, alert, and alive. Not necessarily in that order, but you know what I'm getting at. Because
Yes,
you're
I do.
driving 80, 100 miles an hour across an interstate at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I've been in those trucks. And that's what that was then. This is now. It really is. And so he went to Loyola, who still owned WWL,
Right.
and he told him, "You have this untapped audience out there. You're playing big band music, which is wonderful. You have any advertisers? You don't have any focus." He said, "Go out there and take a look at what's going on the highways. It's nothing but trucks everywhere. And you have a flamethrower signal." Now, I'm going to kind of take another little route here. Stop me when I say, stop me when you get enough of this, okay? Because
No,
Oh
no,
no.
it's great being in
You
there are
business.
kidding?
so many, like, there, there are so many facets that kind of play all together to make it happen. So you you've got a 50,000 watt station in St. Louis,
Right.
KS. I know where they're in Denver, but WIL in St. Louis. They have a 360-degree full pi signal. So wherever you are in a 360-degree circle around St. Louis, that signal is going your way.
Right.
Now, if we did that in New Orleans, half of our signal would be, entertaining the fish in the Gulf of Mexico.
Right.
Combine the fact that it's the Jesuit order of the Catholic Church, it's a heritage station going back to the 1920s, and it just doesn't make any sense to have a clear channel station with a 360-degree pattern in New Orleans
Right.
or San Francisco or
Right.
Savannah, Georgia. So the FCC said, take the whole pie, the 50,000 watt pie that everybody else has, but take your pie and just shove it north.
Wow.
So we went from a circle to a wedge, if that makes you can see my hand. So instead of doing this,
Kind of like the Wi-Fi symbol of today.
we had regular listeners at a bakery in Canada that used to send hot cross buns down at Easter. We had a regular listener. His name was Jerry Cox. He and his wife, Jackie, were wonderful people up in Chicago. He was a CTA driver, Chicago Transit Authority bus driver, but he listened to the show in the bus. And when he went home, and so we did, in 1988, we did a trucking show up at McCormick Place in Chicago.
Ah.
And that's the year we gave away a prototype of the new Marmon truck.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody giving away a truck in those days,
Yeah.
And
They
so,
weren't expensive like they are now.
yeah. Got a funny story about that too. But at any rate, we went to Chicago. He invited us out to dinner. So he'd lived in this, great Italian neighborhood in the south side of Chicago. We went to a restaurant down the street from his home. It looked like the restaurant from the movie The Godfather. I mean, I swear to God, just and so we ate. And Mickey McIntyre and myself, Mickey was working with us at that time. She's since passed away many years ago. But we went to his home. We walked over to his house. He took me down in the basement, guys. He had a workbench down there with a radio. Flipped it on, and there's WWL coming in like a local station. Unreal. So thanks to that wedge that the FCC allowed. So what better vehicle, pun intended, for a trucking radio program? So the program was about keeping drivers awake, alert, and alive, and it was country music because that was the the major format. You had to do one thing or another. And we had a lot of comedy. We played a lot of comedy.
Yeah.
Bob Newhart, Justin Wilson, Hudson and Landry, Jerry Clower, and those sort of things. Took phone calls. But essentially, the show was requests from a wife or a sweetheart at home to the driver out on the road. So when I came back from the Army in '72, during Vietnam, if you had a full-time job before you went into the service, they had to give you your job back
Right.
when you got out. But if you were part-timer, you were part-time. So I was just a part-time kid when I left. I've said, well, I'm just going to go down there and talk to John and see if anything ever comes up. I wanted to let him know I'm back, and I'd love to come back. When I walked into the station, that guys was on North Rampart Street in New Orleans, right there in the French Quarter.
Right.
And he said, Dave, I can't believe this. He says, you must have just passed a guy on the sidewalk. He said, I just had to let a guy go. When can you start? Timing is everything, right? It is everything. So I said, tomorrow. Okay, you're on tomorrow, which was the 4th of July.
Wow.
1972. Yeah. So anyway, I did, and I was doing some weekend stuff, that sort of thing. So I met Charlie Douglas, who was playing country music for a bunch of truck drivers in New Orleans, and it was, he was the odd man out in terms of music and stuff like that. The radio station at that point had already gone. It was still playing music on AM at that point, but we had an FM too, and all of that. That's kind of an aside. But so I met him, and my joke is, I was the only one there besides him who knew Conway from Twitty. And what I meant by that is Harold Jenkins Jr.,
right,
whose dad was a riverboat pilot on the Mississippi River. He's from Mississippi. He became a country rock and roll first. Sort of like a lot of guys wanted to be Elvis back in those days. And
Right.
he did some rock and roll things. But Conway, Arkansas, Twitty, Texas, they picked those names to create Conway Twitty. And I knew that story. I knew that Johnny Cash was not in the Army. He was in the Air Force, that sort of thing. And he and I hit it off. And I played in a band through high school and college that was a working band.
Right.
In other words, when I was a sophomore in high school, I accidentally I replaced the drummer in this band because he got sick, and they had heard me play in my little high school band, and he said, the leader said, hey, would you like to do a gig, Saturday night? I said, sure. Oh yeah, of course. What do you mean, And so I did, and so this was a play it all band. We played In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida by Iron Butterfly. One night, and Is Anybody Going to San Antone by Charlie Platt.
Wow.
We were playing everything because we worked weddings, we worked clubs. It was a working band. So I knew a lot about country music at that point. So we kind of just hit it off, and eventually I replaced his weekend guy who went out to California to become a judge, as a matter of fact.
Whoa.
And then so we worked at 50-50 on the calendar, but in reality, I added it up, and I was doing the road gang about 64% of the time because Charlie was gone a lot. And back in those days, Johnny Carson was the host of the Tonight Show, and Johnny Carson was known for being gone a lot. You guys probably all remember that, but
Right.
And so Charlie kind of was known as the Johnny Carson of radio because he was always someplace else. So that, and then Charlie in 1984 left New Orleans for Nashville because his dream was to be on the Grand Ole Opry. And he became an announcer on the Opry. He worked for WSM Radio.
Right.
And so in '84 on WWL, I took the show. I got the show. I didn't take it. I had to apply for it. So let's go back to Nebraska. There's a station out in Nebraska called KRVN, and they have a 50,000 watt signal. going west, not in a circumference,
Oh, okay.
not in a 360 degree.
Right,
They go,
right, right.
the stations were around too. So they were protecting other stations. So they go west. And one night a truck driver called me and said, boy, I'm glad that station out in Nebraska went off the air because I can hear you now. Now they were at 880 AM. We're at 870. But that's too close for comfort.
Yeah.
Okay. So I said, whoa, really? I did not know that because I'd never heard it because I'm in New Orleans and they're going west out of West Nebraska. So our engineering staff, and I said, guys, what if and they were doing the trucking show. Okay. But it just didn't pan out. And when Charlie started the trucking show on Wednesday, by Thursday night, everybody else with a big signal was doing trucking radio, and that's a whole nother chapter. But a very interesting chapter. So we got together with those guys, and what happens when you think of two tractor trailers in a tunnel, side by side in a 2-lane road, and they're driving down the road like this. Well, what's going to happen is they're going to get really close, and in radio they're this close, 870, 880.
Right.
And it's going to establish what is known as a beat frequency. They're going to go doom, 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 doom. So you get that sound like there's. The name of the song was The Big Hurt back in the late 50s. And they used that. If you took two records and put them on a turntable, the same record, and you started them at the exact same time, and you use your finger to kind of slow down one of them so they beat together, you get this sound. It's very cool in that record. It's called The Big Hurt. I can't remember the name of the single, but she was really good. Anyway, so what they did was, and so KRVN went for the idea first off. Okay, let me put it that way. And so what happened was our station, Hugh Burney was the chief engineer at WWL. They established a thing where we delayed our signal by 0.7 of a second, guys, to erase the beat frequency. And so therefore, we were on 870 and 880, and it sounded like the same station.
Wow.
Then we added a few other stations. We had 5 altogether, AM, big stations. So, and then satellite radio is born. What are you talking about? What do you mean? You mean we're going to, well, I know it's satellite, the first person to speak to the American public by satellite was President Dwight Eisenhower, 1956.
Really? Did it
play
been around that long?
Yeah. We play it every year on the anniversary. And then I have to translate because you can't understand a word he's saying, but he is speaking from a satellite in outer space. And so we did. And so Sirius and XM were 2 separate companies,
right?
Completely different. But is there room for 2 satellite radio things? Not really. And so they merged. And I'm thankful to God every day that we made the merge. We made the move, and here we are.
Now, what year was that merge?
2011.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that.
Because I think that's that's about the time I was introduced to satellite radio. My son had bought me a satellite. You actually had to have a special satellite radio for your vehicle. And my son had bought it for me for Christmas. And oh my God, I thought I had discovered oxygen for the first time.
Oh, yeah. Truck drivers were beta testers for a couple of years for both systems, and they would let them know where the dead spots were, let them know how far into a tunnel they could get. And they started putting out the repeaters. got a great story. There's a lady. We were on a station out of Buffalo, New York, on AM, and a lady named Eleanor Lamont lived up in Freiburg, Maine. She wasn't a truck driver or anything, but she
Right.
loved to listen to the radio, and she really kind of just fell in love with us on the show. And she would call in and things, and delightful lady. A lot of drivers who may be listening or watching this, because we're on video, man. I forgot about that.
I remember hearing a couple
Yeah.
of her phone calls.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. So when we started talking about the fact that we're moving on to satellite radio, she called and, well, what do I do? So she goes down to Circuit City. She's
I
like,
remember that.
Man, you talk about a blast from the past.
she goes down to Circuit City, and she's trying to tell these kids in the radio section there what satellite radio is. They have no clue.
That's why they went bankrupt.
Yeah, precisely. It's Eleanor's fault. But yeah, so we did that, and we made the merge, and here we are today. And it's really a thrill to be able to broadcast all aspects of trucking, because frankly, you're St. Louis and Kansas City. Once you get out of Kansas City heading east, you can hear us all the way to almost St. Louis, and
Yeah.
so it was the long distance over the road, full truckload listener that we were really catering to.
Sure.
All of the P&D guys, all of the garbage guys, trash guys, all of the locals, local drivers.
Right.
They couldn't hear us very well unless they were around New Orleans or in one of the cities, that were part and parcel of the small network. And now 24/7, 365 throughout Canada, the U.S. Yeah.
I tell you, hearing your story and tying it in with the way that you and Chuck met, they say there's no such thing as luck. It's your luck is those are prepared or in the right situation at the right time and able to take advantage of it. And also it ties into a book I read a while ago by Malcolm Gladwell talking about the 10,000 hours
Yes.
to become I think the book name was Outliers.
Great book.
Yeah, absolutely. But it shows how the amount of time that you had already put in with all of the different things that you just explained in your background, and how, like I said, you definitely are the pioneer in the space. So it's definitely a fascinating story to hear about how the transition that you have seen from your time of getting started, bringing it all the way up to modern times. This thing is, you've seen it all.
Or heard it all. And I want to point out, and there were quite a number of guys on the AM stations late at night after Charlie started up. So he started day one, I started day two, if you want to put that in the following year. But two other guys.
Charlie were the pioneers of this whole thing, really.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Chuck,
You and Charlie were really the pioneers of this entire thing.
Yeah, I would say he's the pioneer. I was the co-driver there, But, Dale Summers, Trucking Bozo, out of WLW Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And of course, Bill Mack, the Midnight Cowboy, out of WDAP in Dallas, Fort Worth. We wound up together on XM,
Right.
and then Sirius XM of all things. And we were all friends. But the companies were, this dog eat dog, just like
right.
Else. But we wound up together on the Diaz at Nats talking together. That was really, I think, a highlight for all three of us.
That had to been a cool, that had to be.
Oh my God.
The three, we were the threes, the last of the Mohicans, if you want to put it that way. We were the remaining survivors from the earlier days. Bozo, Dale, he came on board. He was in radio. To your point, Rico, he was in radio all of his life too, and then wound up going to Cincinnati and then doing trucking there. So he started his trucking radio thing in '84. The same year that we made the transition to WW. Right. Bill, to his undying credit, yes, Bill did say hello to drivers, acknowledged truck drivers. So let me put it that way on the road. But his audience was the general overall country music aficionado,
Right.
not pinpointing into the trucking world. He did when trucking radio became a thing, obviously. I mean, it's a
Right.
competitive world. But to show you how serious Charlie was about the audience and who we serve, because trucking is a service industry. We are a service to a service industry, and we take that very seriously. So he would say on the air, guys, hey, listen, if you're not a truck driver, we love having you listening. You're welcome on board, but we don't really care. This program is for the professional, at that time, the professional over the road truck driver.
Yeah. That
Because
was back in
of the
the
constraints of the signals in the cities.
yeah. That was back in the days, if you remember, when you walked into a truck stop, there were special seating for truck drivers.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know?
A big horseshoe counter with one poor waitress doing like a pinball inside. Yeah, yeah.
You know, and then they came out with, you know, if you remember the old truck stops, there'd be like 50 guys all smoking cigarettes, waiting to use the payphone,
Oh,
and you
my
would hear the other guy's conversation, and people would be swearing at dispatchers and swearing at their wives and their kids, and some guys would be crying on the phone because his girlfriend was going to break up with him, all sorts of stuff. It was, you could actually have made a TV show out of that. And
Oh,
then
for
around
sure.
that time, around the, if I'm not mistaken, around the mid 80s, they started to put telephones at the tables.
Yep.
And that was like, oh my God, this is brilliant. You know, and you could call your broker, or call your dispatcher, or call your wife or your mom or whoever. And that was brilliant. Brought some more privacy into the conversation too.
Well, you know what else they started doing in the mid to late 80s? They started putting those baby changing tables in
Yes.
men's rooms. And that is where, and again, I just have, everybody has a perspective, and everybody observes from the vantage point that can only come from one little pinpointed spot. My perspective of how trucking became regionalized ties into those baby changing tables. Because when I grew up, and Chuck, you can relate to this, Rico, probably not as much
He's
because of
just
age, because of generations. But the father was the breadwinner. And that was job one for
yeah.
the father, bringing home the bacon. And
Right.
so it wasn't a lot of time to be dad. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that there wasn't dadism, but again, dad had to be here, father had to be here, breadwinner had to be here. Because mom wasn't working in the
Right.
50s, 40s. So all that being said, more and more guys out on the road wanted to be home more often. And I think that is the impetus, the societal change that occurred in the mid 80s is the impetus for the regionalization of trucking. Now, a lot of companies are saying, we'll get you home every night and still operate in a larger region with drop and hook and, relay driving and stuff like that. So yeah, the parameters have changed. And it's so weird too when you put two and two together. You come up with four, I think, when you say, well, you know what? The bread and butter of the all-night trucking shows on AM radio had to be the long-distance driver who was caught between one city or another. So the open spaces where those signals would come in. So as trucking regionalizes, what happens there? It
Yeah.
just
You
falls
know,
off a cliff. So satellite radio comes along at the perfect time. Again, there's timing in terms of capturing everybody all at the same time, no matter where they were, no matter what time of day it was.
Right. Right. And
yeah.
I'll tell you, and also, I can only imagine the over the time span of your career, all of the people that you have come in contact with, and all of the relationships that you have built. But from used to be former. I'm kind of regionalized, like you were just talking about now, but I'm still in the truck every day. But coming from most of us truckers out here, we definitely appreciate the service that you guys did bring to the table, because it helped connect the dots on so many different levels when it comes to different things specifically within the trucking industry. You guys kind of help connect a lot of dots and help and kind of help put build relationships throughout the country for people. I mean, like I say, some of your callers that call into the show are legendary.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's an equation, you know, it really is. It's a real equation. And
but
Yeah, you know,
I just want to say thank you for your service, and thank you for for everything that you have done, because definitely you definitely are an inspiration to us all.
and
well,
yet you have done so much for our industry and the people in it, and kept so many of us awake during those long dark nights when, you know what, we knew we had to get somewhere and we didn't have a lot of juice in our personal tank to get there, but listening to your voice, and that kept us going, and God bless you for that. We really appreciate it. You've done just an amazing job. Thank you.
well, thank you very much, guys. Really enjoyed our time. I guess I really did most of the talking here, but hey,
Well,
that's
we wanted you to. You know what? Our listeners are used to Rico and I, but having Dave Nemo, one of the pioneers of this whole thing, join us today is such an honor. Because you've
thank,
given
thank
so much to this industry. You know,
Truly
and
fascinating.
yeah, we all think so much and appreciate everything you have done. It's fantastic, really. You are one of our heroes. You really are.
the honor is mine, guys, and I mean that sincerely. So,
We certainly want you to. We'd love to have you come on here again sometime to continue on, because I think we've just scratched the surface of what you have seen in your 54 years of service to the trucking industry, and how
what,
many boys and girls grew up listening to you in the
yeah.
middle of the night. Whether they were driving or they were listening to you while their dad was driving.
Yes, yeah, I made a lot of
There's a lot of that. I can only imagine what from your perspective, how you've seen things change. Everybody knows they've changed, but I'd love to hear sometime. And I don't know if we have enough time today, but certainly love to have you on again to just tell us what the changes you've seen from behind the mic from the audience, because it's all changed. I know that when you started, it was all farm boys from Nebraska.
mm,
And now we've got farm boys from the Punjab. It's just
yeah,
changed.
yes, absolutely. You know, I'll tell you what, if you guys do have me back on, I'll 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 explain my theory again, my theory about where social media started.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, you have an invitation to join Rico and me again, because we want to continue. I think this is a real hot topic, and we need to talk about this.
All right, sir. Chuck,
All right.
thank you so much. Rico, thank you very much.
Thank
Really,
you
God
again for
bless you.
taking the
Thank you
time
so
out.
much. Thank you for your service, and we wish you another 54 wonderful years of broadcasting. I know you're doing it part time, but we want to still hear your voice.
thanks, guys.
Thanks again, Dave. So we're going to let Dave go ahead and bow out and enjoy the rest of his day, because we're recording this on Sunday. So we definitely want to thank Dave again for being so gracious with his time. So we'll let Dave go ahead and continue the rest of his day, because this is a Sunday. He was so gracious enough to take a little time out to join us, and we definitely appreciate him doing so. So thanks again, Dave.
Thanks, Dave. God bless, and we'll have you on again soon. Wow, Rico, that was something. My gosh.
Man, I tell you, that was a absolutely fascinating, very stimulating. He did most of the talking, like he said, but it wasn't a dull moment in there. And I was just fascinated listening to him talk about all the different things. And like I say, I'm in my mind, I'm making different connections back to, the Malcolm Gladwell book just popped in my mind about, you spend so much time doing something and you become so proficient and professional at it, that it may not necessarily be the direction that you had envisioned going in, but you are prepared to take it in that direction because of all the time that you'd already spent doing the little things to get prepared for that.
If I can make a suggestion to our listeners, if you like to listen to books or read them, the best book you are going to listen to or read is the one Rico's referring to by Malcolm Caldwell. It's
Malcolm Gladwell. It's called
Gladwell,
Outlier.
yeah.
The title of the book is Outlier.
The Outlier. It explains the Beatles. It explains Apple. Bill Gates. All these people, why they are successful. And you know what? It's that 10,000 hour thing. Except for the one thing I do. Hockey players, I found this really interesting in the book. If you remember, hockey players are only born 3 months a year: January, February, March. If your chance of your kid playing professional hockey, if he's not born in those 3 months, they're slim to none. I probably have a better chance of getting in the NFL. And I'm 71 years old, 5'6", and never played football in my life. But it's things like that you'll learn from that book. It's a great read.
Absolutely. So this has been a very fascinating show. Very, I tell you, I'm still kind of at a little bit of loss of words because we.
So am I. You know what? I feel like I just met royalty or a movie star or something.
Yeah, it definitely was a great opportunity, and we definitely appreciate Dave Nemo, big fan of the show, for coming on, for taking the time out and coming on to the show. And we were just talking about, I wanted to kind of tie the dots together. We were talking about, the 10,000 hours and things of that nature. Going back to our industry when it comes to negotiating and everything, guys, we were talking before we came on air, Chuck, about the rates and everything that we're experiencing out here. And for all the guys and girls that are out there listening, to kind of bring this thing full circle, we have to be more informative in our negotiations. When we're dealing with people, we have to explain, sometimes we have to explain to them what all is involved in, when it comes to trying to get a better price right now, because I understand it's difficult negotiating. If you're on the spot market, negotiating rates are very difficult and very hard right now. And in the best manner, if you can, be as professional as you always can, of course, be as courteous as you always can, but always, take that as an opportunity to inform the broker about what it may not be but so many miles, but you have to inform them, hey, it's going to take 3-4 hours to get this thing loaded. It's going to take another 3-4 hours to get this thing unloaded. And if you want to have, if price is the only thing, then that's one thing. But you have to inform them that you pride yourself on delivering more than just a good value. Your value includes not only the price that they're getting your service for, but also making them look good to their customer as well by providing on-time pickup, on-time delivery, so on and so forth, and everything. Sometimes all of that doesn't fit into a nice little box where the rate is at rock bottom. Sometimes that comes at a premium, and you have to make sure if you're delivering a premium service or a worthwhile service, you have to make sure that you express and understand the value of what it is that you're bringing to the table.
It's so true, Rico. I want to add something to that, if you don't mind. And this is just a reminder to our listeners. These are tough times, and we don't know where the bottom is with rates. And it's very important that you develop a protocol for yourself, that when you pick up on time, you let the broker or the customer know when you've picked up. Let them know, kill them with service. Let them know if it's a long trip. Keep in touch with them. Say, okay, I'm in, if you're going from New York to California, call them every day or send them a text or send them an email. Keep them informed where you are. When you deliver, let them know you've delivered and send them a copy of the POD if you want right away. Do everything you can to make them look good and they'll call you again. Okay, it's really important because it's tough sledding out there. You've got to be the best, and being the best isn't just picking up and delivering, it's the other little things. And
Right.
my best advice to everybody out there, remember consistency. You can't be great one day and lousy the next. Be
Right.
consistent, okay? Be consistent at getting back to people. You want to tick off a broker, don't call them back, okay? Or tick off a customer, don't call them back. Be responsive. And if you do those things, you'll have a business.
Absolutely.
You just have to be the best in these times.
Man, I forgot to I'm derelict in my duties. I forgot to ask Dave to tell the good people how they could find them. But I think everybody knows how to find Dave Nemo.
Oh yeah. Pretty easy. We've been finding him for about 54 years.
Right. But absolutely. So Chuck, while we get ready to close out here, I'll let you tell everybody how they can get in contact to find you, and we'll get ready to wrap this thing
yes,
up.
if anybody needs me for anything, if I can help them with anything, I know some of our listeners are certainly going through some real tough sledding right now, and they're reaching out to me, and I'm giving them the best advice I can for what they're facing. You can contact me at chucksnow280@outlook.com. Please put your phone number. Chances are I'm going to phone you back and answer whatever I can to help you. So with that, Rico, I'll let you back. We're in a hole for another week.
Well, once again, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you guys for taking time out to watch the show. Hopefully you got something from it. If you found anything that we talked about today informative or entertaining at all, please do us a huge favor and share, like, subscribe to the show. It definitely helps us out. It doesn't cost you a thing, but we would be so grateful if you did so. And with that being said, we want you guys to continue to stay safe out there, stay healthy, keep it in between the mustard and the mayonnaise, and God willing, we'll talk at you same time, same place next week. God bless you and good night.
Catch you on the flip flop.